Hello there, I'm Ron Bailey, and welcome to another episode of Bible Base Podcasts. And this one is going to be different. The tree is up, the lights are all a twinkle, lots of wrapping paper and excited ladies about our house. And this is Bible Base Advent Calendar. Some years ago, I did a series of blogs which are still accessible, or will be by the time you're listening to this, leading up to the event of Christmas Day itself and its implications and consequences. And each Christmas I've tried to repeat that, and this Christmas, with the aid and assistance of Mike Coles and newliferadio.co.uk, we're creating a blog post, we're creating a podcast, we're doing a live version on Mike Coles' newliferadio.co.uk, and we're trying to spread the word as widely as we can. So if you would like to help us in that, we'd be very grateful. You're welcome. Let's make a start and you'll see the kind of level that I'm hoping to work at. Day one, I've called this the promise of the seed to Eve. And I have in my mind a particular version of the scripture with this statement from the very beginnings of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15, after man's defection and the invasion of the human race by an alien spirit, God speaks to the spirit and he says this: I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Let's start at the very beginning. Do you remember this theme? The children have complained that they're unable to sing, and their tutor guardian, Maria, begins to sing. You start at the very beginning. It's a very fine place to start. When you read, you begin with ABC. When you sing, you begin with Do, Re, Mi. The Advent story of the coming into the world of the Son of God does not begin in Matthew or Luke. It begins in the book of the beginnings. We usually call it Genesis. In some parts of the world, they don't call it Genesis. They call it the first book of Moses. And I think that can be a helpful title. It reminds us that these are the writings of Moses that were created for a people who would become the people of God through a unique covenant at Sinai. Up until that time, God had related to individuals such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, or Israel, as we know him better. But in the second book of Moses, also known as Exodus, we read the story of a people who were delivered from cruel bondage and who became God's people, God's nation, by covenant. He revealed his character to them through the personal name of Jehovah, Yahweh. I know there are different ways of pronouncing it, but nobody knows how it was pronounced. So I'm going to stick to the old-fashioned way of Jehovah. It has a certain provenance in hymns and all kinds of other ways. So he revealed his character to them through the personal name of Jehovah, who became known as Jehovah, the God of Israel. Israel's God, a phrase used more than 200 times in the Old Covenant scriptures. The books of Moses are the biblical equivalent of an ABC, or Do, Re, Mi. They begin by introducing the people of Israel to the Creator God, Elohim, the Creator and Lord of the universe. In Genesis chapter 1, he is unnamed and is simply referred to as God, Elohim. In chapter 2, where relationship begins to be the focus, he is named as Jehovah. Moses is revealing to the people of Israel that their God, Jehovah, the God of Israel, the one who created the universe, is not a territorial or a local God, as our ancestors in Mesopotamia or Egypt might have known, but he is God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. That's Genesis 14, verse 19. He is the God who entered into covenant with Abraham. This is Genesis 14:22. But Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to Jehovah, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth. He's described as Jehovah, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. At Sinai, he became Jehovah, the God of Israel. So Moses introduces his readers to Jehovah, the God of Israel, and he introduces his readers to the origins of the people of Israel. Without the first book of Moses, the rest of the Old Testament scriptures would be incomprehensible. These 5 books introduce us to Jehovah and to the people of Israel. The first verse of the second book of Moses would make no sense at all without the first book of Moses. Genesis is the beginning of the story of the human race and traces the drama of redemption. Genesis brings the record to the time of the Egyptian migration. The thief. In the first chapters of the first book of Moses, we read the record of a perfect creation, the first man and woman. We read that God, Elohim, pronounced the couple the crown of his creation, a creation that was now very good. But it didn't remain very good. And the third chapter gives the record of an intruder into that paradise. The story is well known and easily accessible to any who would read it. But centuries later, the Apostle Paul added another dimension to the events of chapter 3. He reveals the lasting significance of those events. In Romans chapter 5 and verse 12, he writes, Through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin. And thus death spread to all men, because all sinned. Through one man. The word simply means a human being, but the subsequent verses show that Paul does have in mind a certain one man, a male. Teachers for centuries have blamed the repercussions of this event on the woman. Some even have that built into their doctrinal statements for their denominations. But Paul lays the blame at the feet of the man. Sin entered the world, the cosmos. The human race became infected with something that the Bible describes as sin. Sin, then, is older than the human race. It did not begin with Adam, but with a spirit being that the Bible calls Satan, or the devil. Christ described that spirit being as a thief. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. John chapter 10, verse 10. Sin in our world began with Satan, but it entered the human race through Adam's disobedience. Human beings are capable of great acts of courage and kindness. They're also capable of Auschwitz. The race that crowned the creation and caused God to describe it as very good, Christ sometimes described as being the children of your father, the devil. This is John chapter 8, verse 44. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, so not only a thief, but a murderer. And he does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. Paul's reference in Romans says, and thus death spread to all. None of us has escaped its contagion. Our world, our nature, our story has been infected by a cosmic vandal. The wonder is that God did not erase our race, but had determined to redeem it. At the very moment of Adam's disobedience and defection, God pronounced a sentence on the initiator of all the world's sorrows. Perpetual enmity and a decisive victory. So Genesis 3 and verse 15, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Bible students sometimes call this verse the proto-evangelion, which is the first good news. This first promise of redemption introduces a theme that continues through the whole of the Bible, the theme of the seed. And modern versions often opt for the word descendant, which may be more easily understood to modern minds. But the word seed carries a sense which will be much more useful to us and to Bible readers in its later fulfillment. The first good news is a Bible word picture of Calvary, the climax of the ages, the collision of two forces synchronized on a cross. Darkness covered the earth and hid from human eyes the promise that was being fulfilled. It was the collision of 2 hours, his and ours. Luke 22, verse 53, Jesus says this to those who came to arrest him. When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. And in John chapter 12 and verse 27, he says, Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I came to this hour. The full horror of man's rebellion was fully revealed at Calvary, and so was the heart of God. John 19, verse 30, So when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, It is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Way back in Isaiah, we read in verse chapter 53 and verse 5, He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. This is the predicted fulfillment that we read of later in the New Covenant Scriptures. This is the fulfillment, but the beginning is here in the first book of Moses. Come and join me again tomorrow, and we will pursue our journey. God bless you.